Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii and sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. But don't worry, you don't have to know anything about the military to listen. You just have to be a Netflix true crime enthusiast, and if that's you, welcome home. Last week, I brought you the case of Colin Turner, and during that episode, I discussed how volatile domestic situations can be for police officers. And as I was watching most of the police cam for the case last week, I kept feeling really anxious for the cops. There was so much going on for them, from the dogs barking to the little 4-year-old boy who kept touching the deputy's belt. I can only imagine the feelings going on inside of the cops. Well, someone recently recommended today's case to me, and without giving it a second thought, Myrtle started researching the case. And it's amazing that it's very similar to Colin's case from last week. But in today's case, more than one person lost their life. Real quick about the Colin Turner and Bree Kuhn case. I said that Bree was off duty, but she was actually AWOL since she was supposed to be at work that day, so I did want to correct that on the record. Also, after speaking to several people about that case, I wish the Navy would have done more to get Bree to report to work that day. Unless she was accustomed to teleworking, which is different, they probably should have realized that she hadn't reported to work before 2 p.m. But anyway, that's just a few of my post-recording thoughts. With that, let's get into today's case. Join me today as I tell you the tragic story of Crystal Hamilton and Ashley Guindon out of Virginia. Now, let's dig in.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Our story today takes place in Woodbridge, Virginia. On Saturday, February 27th, 2016, an 11-year-old boy who I will call Sean, not his real name, came home after being at a friend's house for a sleepover the night before. His parents, Ronald and Crystal Hamilton, were both at their house on Lashmere Court in Woodbridge, Virginia when he returned. The dad, Ronald, who went by Ronnie, but I will be calling him Hamilton throughout, well, Hamilton and Crystal had been having marital issues for several months now, and they were actually staying in the same house but sleeping in separate bedrooms. As soon as Sean arrived home, Hamilton told his son to go to his room and clean it. So Sean went into his bedroom but could hear his parents fighting. It seemed that the parents were trying to be as quiet as possible so that their son couldn't hear them argue, but whatever they were doing, it wasn't working. Sean could still hear them. He heard his dad tell his mom to go into the primary bedroom so that they could talk, but Crystal didn't want to go in there with him. Then Sean heard Crystal tell Hamilton that she was going to go out that night. Crystal and a group of her friends were planning on meeting at a restaurant before a girls' night out. After Crystal told Hamilton that she was going out, Hamilton answered saying, quote, "If you go out, you're not coming back," end quote. Crystal eventually gave in and she went into the bedroom with Hamilton. The next thing that Sean heard was his mom screaming. Somehow, from inside that bedroom, Crystal was able to tell Sean that his dad had thrown her across the room. After she dialed 911, Hamilton yelled at Crystal saying, quote, "Crystal, stop, don't do that," end quote, meaning don't call 911. Hamilton then shouted to Sean that it's all fine, your mom just hurt herself. During that 911 call, Crystal was crying and told the dispatcher, quote, My husband just assaulted me. The dispatcher asked her if she was hurt, and Crystal said yes. And later during that call, she said her head was really hurt. Just after she said that, Crystal was heard screaming, "Stop!" And then the call went silent. The dispatcher tried calling back 3 times, but Crystal never answered. The next thing Sean heard were 3 shots. Then he didn't hear his mom anymore. Hamilton told Sean to go down to the basement. Meanwhile, 3 officers from the Prince William County PD had been dispatched and were en route to Hamilton's house. Officer David McCune was a 12-year veteran of the force and a field training officer. With him that day was his trainee, a rookie officer by the name of Ashley Guindon. Just ahead of them in another patrol car was Officer Jesse Hempin, who arrived at the Hamiltons' house first, but he was alone. As with any domestic violence call, Officer Hempton waited for backup before going up to the door. Once Officers McCune and Guindon arrived, they saw Ronnie Hamilton step out into the front step of his house. He was unarmed and insisted, "Hey, everything's fine," and that Crystal had just left the house. Hamilton then suddenly turned, walked back into the house, and locked the door behind him. When the officers approached the door, they demanded to speak to Crystal. Hamilton, however, refused to open the door for them. Fearing for Crystal's safety, Officer McCune kicked in the door. Ronald Hamilton was just inside, crouched down in the foyer, and he was armed with an AK-47 rifle. And immediately, as soon as the door was kicked open, he opened fire on all 3 police officers. Officer McCune could feel bullets impacting his body and tried to reach for his service weapon, but something was off. He couldn't get his gun because his arm just stopped working. McCune knew he had to get out of the way of the AK-47 because he had been staring directly down the rifle's barrel, and he knew he was a wide open target. He turned to run and made it outside, but collapsed flat on his face just to the right of the front door on the grass. Luckily, McCune's radio landed by his head when he fell. He called for a signal 1 on the radio, which means that an officer is in distress and in need of immediate assistance. Every available officer is supposed to respond. Officer Hempin was also hit. He could feel a burning sensation in his leg just before he and Officer McCune ran from the house. Despite the injury, he managed to get out and take cover between the cars that were in the driveway. Hempin looked around for the rookie cop, Officer Guindon. At first, Hempton couldn't see her, and then he spotted her lying in the lawn at the front of the yard. She had been seriously wounded. I know I mentioned that Officer Guindon was a rookie, but what I didn't say was exactly how new she was. You see, Saturday, February 27th, 2016, this day, was Officer Ashley Marie Guindon's very first day on patrol. Officer Hempton tried to comfort Officer Guindon, but she was so new, he didn't even know her name. He did what he could to keep her calm, saying, "Hang in there, new girl, hang in there." Neighbors were watching the scene unfold from their houses nearby, and they were completely stunned that this was all going down in their quiet neighborhood in Woodbridge. Other officers started arriving to the Hamiltons' house, and the first one that got there after the shooting started was Officer Brandon Rutherford. He could see the wounded officers on the grass in front of the house, but he couldn't get to them because Hamilton was still armed and hiding inside the house. Officer Rutherford took cover behind his patrol car and loaded the police-issued shotgun he had in the back. He wanted to have some heavy firepower if he had to confront Hamilton directly. Inside the house, Hamilton was still hiding from the cops, but he picked up his phone and he texted his sister, Julie. Hamilton's text message caused Julie to panic and fear for his safety, and she was also fearful for Crystal's safety. So she texted him back saying, "Ronnie, call me, please, please, please." But he did not text or call Julie back. However, he did call his other sister, who happened to live in South Carolina. When Cassandra Williams, the sister, answered, she was out with some family having dinner. Her brother didn't sound right to her, though. Hamilton immediately started saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Cassandra asked him what was going on, but then she thought she heard a gunshot. Thinking that her brother had just shot himself, she hung up and went to go get her family. But then Hamilton called her back, and he was pissed. He wanted to know why she hung up. She told him, "I hung up because I thought you shot yourself." And then Hamilton started telling his sister what had happened. He said, "You're going to be really mad at me." When Cassandra asked him why, he said, "I shot a cop." Cassandra is a cop herself. At the time of this incident, she was a police captain in Summerville, South Carolina. and she had been an officer for 19 years. I'm sure she drew on that experience when she started asking Hamilton a slew of questions. She was like, what happened to Crystal? Where is Crystal? Hamilton's answer was chilling. He said, she's in heaven. Cassandra asked him what happened, and his answer was, we got into an argument. She called the cops on me. Cassandra next was like, where is my nephew Sean? Hamilton told her that his son was there in the house with him. Cassandra then instructed Hamilton that Sean needed to get out of the house immediately, and she told her brother to call 911 and let them know that he was going to release the little boy who was going to be coming into the house and for them not to shoot him. Cassandra stayed on the phone with Hamilton while he called Sean up from the basement and told him to run from the house. Sean was terrified. He was only 11 years old, and in his 11-year-old mind, he didn't know what would happen when he ran out of the door. He knew there were cops outside, and the little boy was smart enough to know that they might shoot thinking he was a threat. When Sean got outside, he frantically looked around before locking eyes with Officer Rutherford. Sean took a step toward the officer before Rutherford told him, just go, go. Sean took off at a sprint and headed down the street away from the nightmare happening at his house. The Hamiltons' neighbor, Tara, had heard the booms and wondered if it was fireworks. When she looked outside, she saw terrified Sean running down the street. Sean was good friends with Tara's son, so she put two and two together and realized that the booms must have been gunshots. Tara went out to the driveway and called Sean over. He was in utter panic. He was only wearing shorts and a t-shirt without any shoes outside. And remember, it's February in Virginia. Tara asked Sean what was going on, and Sean's answer was chilling. He said, my dad shot my mom and a cop. Tara quickly brought him inside. Back at the Hamiltons' house, Cassandra was still on the phone with her brother. Hamilton told his sister that he wanted to kill himself, and Cassandra told him that he couldn't because if he did, then he would go to hell. Hamilton then said, okay, fine, then I'll just commit suicide by cop instead. And Cassandra doubled down. It didn't matter. If you commit suicide by cop, you're still going to hell. She told him, you're going to put the gun down and you're going to walk out there with your hands up. Hamilton went to the front door. There was a glass storm door between him and the cops. He raised his hands up about halfway while holding a handgun in his hand. Officer Rutherford yelled out commands to Hamilton, show me your hands, put down your gun. Hamilton opened the storm door and tossed the gun outside. Officer Rutherford considered taking a shot at him, but he decided not to. Eventually, Hamilton walked out of the front door unarmed with his arms up. Officers immediately took him into custody. Now that the danger was over, the attention turned to the three gravely wounded officers lying on the ground in the front yard. Officer Jesse Hempton had been shot once in the thigh, causing extensive damage to his leg. Officer David McCune had been shot 3 times, once in the upper leg, once in the chest, and in his right elbow. He had a collapsed lung, broken wrist, a broken femur, and his elbow was nearly destroyed. Rookie Officer Ashley Guindon had been shot in the chest, and her condition was extremely grave. All 3 officers were airlifted to the hospital in a helicopter. Once they arrived at Inova Fairfax Hospital, their conditions were evaluated. Officers Hempton and McEwen received devastating injuries but survived. Sadly, 28-year-old Officer Ashley Marie Guindon was pronounced dead at the hospital. Back at the scene, officers made entry into the house where they discovered Crystal in the bedroom where she had fought with her husband. She was dead due to multiple gunshot wounds to her head and back. By 7 p.m., Crystal's girlfriends were out and they were so excited for their night out. They were waiting for her to arrive for dinner. One of them sent a text message to Crystal wondering where she was and why she wasn't there yet. What they didn't realize at the time was that Crystal's life had been taken. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns, and April is Financial Literacy Month, an entire month dedicated to taking control of your money. Because honestly, no one really taught me how to manage money growing up. I didn't learn about investing until I was well into adulthood. But what I love about Acorns is that it makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future in just 5 minutes. I know, April is an entire month, but you don't need an entire month to learn. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns recommends a diversified portfolio that matches you and your goals. You can start with just your spare change, and you don't need a lot of time. Setup takes just 5 minutes because I know that your time is precious. And if financial wellness has ever felt out of reach, Acorns makes it simple, giving your money a chance to grow without the overwhelm. Personally, using Acorns gave me the confidence to stop putting it off and just start. And that peace of mind is completely worth it. Sign up now and join over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $25 billion with a B dollars with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/militarymama or download the Acorns app to get started today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/militarymama.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
Once Hamilton was taken into custody, they learned that he was an active duty Army Staff Sergeant and that he was assigned to the Pentagon at the Joint Staff Support Center. He was held without bond on charges of capital murder of a police officer, assault with a firearm, and murder in the first degree for killing his wife, Crystal. The following Monday, February 29, 2016, Hamilton faced 2 different judges. The first was Prince William Juvenile and Domestic Relations Judge Lisa Baird, and that was regarding the charges related to his wife, Crystal. The second judge he faced was Prince William General District Court Judge Robert Coleman, related to the death of Officer Ashley Guindon and the shootings of the other 2 officers. During these brief hearings, Hamilton showed no emotion, and he requested an attorney. Edward Ungvarsky of the Virginia Capital Defender's Office was assigned as Hamilton's court-appointed attorney. The attorney immediately requested a gag order be placed that would bar the prosecution and the police department from talking about the case. The prosecuting attorney, Paul Ebert, requested that Hamilton continue to be held without bond, and it was because of the nature of the charges and due to a previous assault conviction from South Carolina that happened in 2007. However, I'll have more about that because we were not able to find a conviction, but we were able to find a case. So let me talk to you about Crystal and Ronnie's relationship. Crystal was attending Hanahan High School in Hanahan, South Carolina, when she met Ronald Williams Hamilton, who was 3 years her senior, and they lived in neighboring towns. Hamilton grew up with his mother, who wasn't married to his dad, and according to one article I read, Hamilton was born from an affair that Hamilton's mother had with Hamilton while Hamilton was married to another woman. Hamilton's father was also named Ronald Hamilton. His father was a police officer in the Charleston PD. When Hamilton was a child, he always got a kick out of sitting in his dad's patrol car with the lights and siren on. One of Hamilton's proudest moments was when his dad sent police cars and motorcycle cops to his middle school for career day. But the older Hamilton traveled a lot for his job, giving speeches on law enforcement tactics. Due to this, and probably due to the fact that little Hamilton was born out of an affair, the older Hamilton wasn't around as much and spent a lot of time away from his son. As Hamilton grew older, he started talking back to teachers and was sent to finish high school at an alternative school. Hamilton's mother, Diane Williams, blamed her baby daddy's absence for their son's outburst. She felt that Hamilton was reacting to missing his father because the older Ronald was never there for him. Hamilton dropped out of high school before graduation, but eventually completed his GED and joined the Army not long after the terrorist attacks of September 11th. After training in IT, Hamilton was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky for the following year. Crystal managed to continue seeing her boyfriend, Hamilton, despite the distance between them, which according to Google is a solid 9.5-hour drive one way. But during the weekends, Crystal would catch a ride from one of her friends who was also dating a soldier at Fort Campbell. In 2003, Hamilton deployed to Iraq. A year later, Crystal was taking classes at Cape Fear Community College in North Carolina when she found out she was pregnant. Crystal's family was totally caught off guard by the announcement of Crystal's pregnancy. They didn't know she had a boyfriend, much less that she was in any type of serious relationship. Crystal and Ronnie Hamilton's son, Sean, was born in February of 2005. His birth was followed by a quick courthouse wedding a few months later, and that was just before Hamilton deployed to Iraq for the second time in October of 2005. In September of 2006, after his return to the States following his deployment, Hamilton was charged with aggravated assault when he pulled a handgun on a man in Tennessee. You see, they were in a parking lot where the victim had confronted Hamilton and accused him of driving a little too close to the victim's girlfriend. The two men got into a shouting match that ended when Hamilton went to his car and grabbed a handgun. He looked at the victim and said, "Ain't no pellet gun," and then inserted a magazine. Hamilton eventually left the scene and the victim called the police. Hamilton was never convicted of the charge of aggravated assault. Instead, he was put into a pretrial diversion program, which is like a supervised probation. Upon successful completion of the program, the case doesn't proceed to trial, so it basically is kind of dropped. After the incident, the Hamilton family moved to Fort Schaffner, Hawaii for a few years, and then they landed in Northern Virginia in 2011 when Hamilton was assigned to the Pentagon with the Joint Staff Support Center. After their move to Virginia, Crystal was hired as a recovery care coordinator for the U.S. Marine Corps Wounded Warrior Regiment. In her role, Crystal organized visits for healthcare and travel for Marines who were recovering from injury. Crystal assisted them as they recovered and returned to duty, but she also helped to return them to civilian life if they were not able to return to service. In her position, one of Crystal's responsibilities was to track legal and medical paperwork for the wounded Marines. One Marine who needed her help was a 22-year-old medically retired Lance Corporal who had a stroke and needed a heart transplant. Crystal was there to assist the Marine and even lobbied to get his disability claim increased. He had to relearn so many things that most people take for granted, like simple addition and subtraction. Crystal helped him find tutors, and she even followed up to make sure the young Marine was actually seeing them and checked on homework. Crystal was a very caring woman, and Hamilton immediately grew jealous of Crystal's work, and he began to believe she was having an affair with someone she met through her job. It came to the point where Hamilton began scrutinizing Crystal's Instagram account, and one day he got it in his head that Crystal was having an affair with a man who supposedly liked too many of Crystal's Instagram pictures. Hamilton was fuming, and so he called his sister Julia. During this conversation, he told his sister that if he ever got proof that Crystal was having an affair, he would kill her. Julia urged Hamilton, "Listen, if it's that serious, leave Crystal and get peace of mind." She felt like he was just venting and wasn't serious, but, she still urged him, just leave her then. But as many of these cases go, someone was having an affair. Hamilton was, in fact, having an affair. It was evident that the marriage was in turmoil, but Crystal tried her best to put on a good front and pretend that things were fine in their lives. And well, it turned out Crystal really was having an affair. On April 5th, 2015, which was Easter Sunday, Hamilton found out who Crystal was having an affair with, and he went to the home of the man and confronted him. Hamilton hit the man and flashed a handgun before saying, "I told you I was going to see about you." The man's wife came running out of their apartment and she broke up the fight. Hamilton left and the man called 911 to report the assault. However, he decided to not press charges. I mean, what in the Jerry Springer kind of episode is this? Everyone is married and there's guns everywhere? What? On the same day, April 5th, Ronnie Hamilton contacted his sister Julia again, this time by text. The text read, "Bad things are running through my mind. I love you all and I'm sorry. I just can't handle it." Julia texted back, "Ronnie, call me, please, please," but he wouldn't respond. Julia was so worried that her brother might be having homicidal thoughts, and when she continuously called her brother and Crystal without any luck, well, Julia told their older sister her suspicions, who immediately called the police. 2 Prince William County PD officers went to the Hamilton house to perform a welfare check. Initially, Hamilton was accepting and invited them inside, but within 30 seconds, his behavior changed, and he started yelling at the officers on repeat to get the out of my house and asking why the they were there. The officers complied with his demands for them to leave, and they passed the information on to Community Service Board so that they would follow up on the incident. Julia also called Crystal's mom, who went to their house and stayed for several days. Hamilton did not appreciate his sister telling others about their private conversations, so he cut off all comms with Julia for several months. Later in that same month, still in April of 2015, Hamilton saw a Prince William County police officer driving his patrol car and talking on his cell phone. Hamilton thought it was illegal, So he decided to make it his business to stop his car in the middle of a busy road, then walk up to the police car and shout, quote, "You police think you are above the law, but you're not," end quote. The cop was able to shut down Hamilton's tirade after he explained to him that it was not illegal to talk on a cell phone while driving in Virginia. And he further reminded Hamilton that it's not a great idea to stop his car in the middle of a busy road. In the end, Hamilton apologized to the police officer. The two shook hands and Hamilton got back in his car and left. And just a note, everybody, listen up. As of January 1st, 2021, it actually is illegal to hold your phone while talking on it and driving in Virginia. So don't go saying that you heard on the Mama Margot podcast that it was okay to drive and talk on your cell phone in Virginia, because it was okay in 2015, but it's not anymore.
Ladies, you'll end up shopping for your guy's deodorant, right? So try Degree's Original Cool Rush. You see, last year, Degree changed the formula, and men were mad. One guy even started a petition. So Degree admitted they messed up and brought the Original Cool Rush scent back. It's clean, crisp, and actually smells like someone you want to cuddle. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So toss one in your cart and find out why it's the best-selling men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes!
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
By Christmas, the couple had mended fences, and Hamilton's sister Julia went to her brother and sister-in-laws to spend the holiday with them. But once Julia got there, she realized things hadn't really changed. She witnessed an ugly fight between the couple. The following month, Crystal confided in Julia that she was going to leave Hamilton because she found out for sure that he was cheating on her. Crystal told Julia that she was done and she wanted a divorce. Hamilton had received orders to Italy to work for NATO, but Crystal had decided that she was going to stay behind with Sean, file for divorce, and petition for full custody. The two women decided that they would move in together after the split, even though the families were separating. Of course, we know that they never got the chance to be roommates, because by the end of February that year, Crystal would be dead and Hamilton would be in jail awaiting trial for 2 murders. Ronald Hamilton's trial didn't start until 2.5 years after he killed his wife Crystal and rookie police officer Ashley Guindon. Hamilton's court-appointed defense attorney Edward Ungvarsky said that Hamilton would be willing to plead guilty if the state took the death penalty off of the table. The prosecutors quickly turned that offer down. The trial would be going forward, and the prosecutors would be seeking the death penalty. On September 11, 2018, the prosecution, led by Brian Boyle, and the defense counsel, Edward Ungvarsky, laid out their cases in their opening statements. Hamilton wore his army dress uniform every single day of the trial. Prosecutor Boyle told the jury that Hamilton's actions had far-reaching impact beyond the Hamilton and Guindon families. He stated, quote, "By the time he was done unleashing his violence, a neighborhood was scarred, a police department was devastated, 3 police officers were on operating tables, and only 2 would survive. A son was left without a mother," end quote. Mr. Ungvarsky told the jury about Hamilton's troubled marriage and all about Crystal's planned night out with her girlfriends. He said that it was Crystal wanting to go out that caused an argument between the couple. The defense attorney went on to say that after Hamilton threw Crystal into a wall, Hamilton's world, quote, was crashing down around him, and, quote, passions erupted. His career allegedly flashed before his eyes. Because of the nature of his job, he required a security clearance. A domestic violence charge could take his security clearance and his entire career away. So their claim was that Crystal was killed in the heat of passion and that it was not by any means premeditated. The defense also claimed that Hamilton didn't fire at the responding police officers with the intent of killing any of them because his shots were fired indiscriminately. The prosecution began presenting their evidence and led with Crystal's 911 call. where she spoke through sobs that her husband threw her against the wall. Then the jury heard her screaming, "Stop," just before the call dropped. Sean, who was now 13 years old, did not want to testify in person. Both of the legal teams agreed that Crystal's mom, which was Sean's maternal grandmother, could read his statement to the jury. His testimony included the statement, quote, "I heard like 3 shots, then my mom went silent," end quote. One of the responding paramedics testified about arriving at the scene and seeing so many people holding gun. He said it felt like war. He thought he was going to be shot. It was like a bomb went off. The paramedic attended to Officer McEwen and told the jury that he knew as soon as he saw the officer that he would need an OR for his numerous bullet wounds, especially for his elbow. The paramedic got Officer McEwen loaded into the helicopter for transport to the hospital. When he got back to his rig and started to clean up the vast amount of blood that seemed to be everywhere, he found a bullet while he was cleaning that apparently came out of the officer's body. The 2 officers that survived their injuries, Jesse Hempin and David McEwen, both testified for the prosecution. They each took the stand and described in detail what happened on February 27, 2016. They both described arriving at the scene, attempting to talk to Hamilton, and then coming under fire from a high-powered rifle. Officer Hempin talked about how his wife had just given birth to their first baby, a daughter, and how as he laid there, he worried that he wouldn't get to see her grow up. Officer Hempin told the jury that he had to spend 5 days in the hospital, endured 2 surgeries, and that it was difficult for him to walk without assistance for a very long time. He testified in uniform and told the court that he has returned to duty but is now working at the police academy. Hempin also stated that his injured leg is still considerably weaker than his good leg and that he still suffers from discomfort and that his leg has lost some sensation due to the large amount of scarring. The jury was shown pictures of the large scar on his upper leg. Officer McEwen wore a suit to testify rather than his duty uniform. He had also returned to the police department to work but had to be on light duty. McEwen testified about being shot 3 times. He was hit in the upper leg, in his chest, and in his elbow. He described how he could hear the blood pouring out of his body at the crime scene. The officer testified that he is no longer able to physically carry out the duties of a patrol officer, so he now works at the police academy. He went on to say that he has gone through 2 surgeries on his leg and 13 on his elbow. His elbow surgeries include pins, plates, and the insertion of cadaver bone in an attempt for him to regain the use of his arm. However, Officer McEwen still had very limited mobility in his elbow joint and showed the jury that he was unable to move it beyond a few degrees. Besides not being able to perform his duties as a patrol officer, he is unable to perform daily activities with his right arm, things that most people take for granted, like being able to bathe or even brush his own teeth. McEwen further described how his injured arm limits him. Quote, "It is unstable, it's not strong, there's no foundation for it to bend. There's a bunch of clicking and grinding as well," end quote. When one of the prosecutors asked him now how his wounds have emotionally affected him, Officer McEwen answered, "I feel useless." Officer Brandon Rutherford, who was the first officer on the scene after the 3 first responding officers were shot, he described how Hamilton had them pinned down from his location inside the house. Responding officers had to take cover behind their patrol vehicles while officers Hempin, McEwen, and Guindon were bleeding out in the yard. Officers Rutherford and Hempin both yelled at Sean to run. The defense presented information about Hamilton's troubled childhood, how he grew up in a dysfunctional family, and how he was the product of an affair where his father chose his wife and his 2 kids with his wife over the son. And basically, he abandoned Hamilton. Testimony about how Hamilton was deployed to Iraq twice and had PTSD was provided by fellow soldiers, educators, and his mentors. They acknowledged his start in life as an at-risk youth and how he needed the discipline that being a soldier provided. While they doubted him at first, they testified that Hamilton developed into someone they considered a brother and a good soldier. They said that Hamilton never forgot to say thank you either. A mitigation specialist for the Capitol Defender Office testified that he had gone to the scene and found 2 prescription bottles on the seat in Hamilton's car. They were both antidepressants, which lent credence to their defense point that he had PTSD. Hamilton's defense team said that once Crystal called 911, after she was thrown up against the wall, basically they said that triggered Hamilton to act, quote, in the heat of passion. That it just, quote, upended Staff Sergeant Hamilton's world. His job, his clearance, his identity, his profession is ruined, end quote. Which, let me just interject here. Isn't it crazy that he would choose murder over getting in trouble for domestic violence? I mean, first of all, don't choose domestic violence at all, but that's just my personal opinion. Before your head explodes listening to this, let me tell you how the prosecutors rebutted. Attorney Matthew Lowry stated, quote, "This is a case that is all about malice." He went on to state that Hamilton committed many, many, many deliberate acts. Mr. Lowry stated, quote, "This is not someone who is freaked out. This is not someone who is out of control. This is a man who wants to control all of his world and who has lethal intent," end quote. Attorney Richard Conway had the final word in the closing statement for the prosecution, stating, quote, "He was in full control of his faculties. He was in full control of his mental state. In fact, he wanted to control everything. He wanted to control his wife. He was trying to control his wife, and then he was trying to control his crime scene," end quote. After closing arguments, the jury began their deliberations on September 26, 2018, for the 17 charges that Hamilton had been tried for. 3 charges were for capital murder, which opened him up to the possibility of receiving the death penalty. The 3 capital murder charges were for killing a law enforcement officer, for killing more than one person as part of the same act or transaction, and for killing more than one person in a 3-year period. It took the jury of 10 women and 2 men 8 hours to return with their unanimous verdict. Guilty on all 17 counts. Hamilton, still in his dress army uniform, kept his eyes straight forward and did not seem to react when the verdict was read.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
The sentencing portion of the hearing began the Monday following the end of the criminal trial on October 1st, 2018. The 4 prosecutors who had successfully presented their case to the jury now wanted to successfully convince the jury to sentence Hamilton to the death penalty. Attorney Brian Boyle didn't utter Hamilton's name during his presentation. He referred to him as either the defendant or the man. Mr. Boyle characterized him as depraved and dangerous and said, quote, "While each of these words is an accurate description of what you've heard over the last few weeks, here in the sentencing hearing, the words have a much greater meaning," end quote, emphasizing that the crime scene demanded a response that is more than the usual response. One of the defense lawyers, Vivian Hernandez, spoke to the jury and said, quote, "Mercy is not expected, it is given. It comes from the recognition of the frailty and sacredness of life," end quote. She went on to say that Hamilton could still contribute to the lives of his family from prison, because after all, she was trying to convince the jury that Hamilton should be sentenced to life in prison and not the death penalty. Notably, Hamilton wore a suit during the sentencing phase. And I wonder why he didn't wear his military uniform any longer. And me and Myrtle have differing opinion as to why that is, but maybe it was strategic. But it's possible that now that he was a convicted felon, the Army didn't feel he should be wearing his uniform any longer. On October 9th, 2018, both Crystal Hamilton and Ashley Guindon's mothers provided victim impact statements for the prosecution. Before Sharon spoke, Ashley's uncle, Walter Nowak, spoke about his niece. He talked about Ashley as a child being loving, active, and an ambitious girl. He then said, as an adult, she grew into someone who wanted to serve others. He stated, quote, "The death of Ashley has devastated me and my family and has definitely left a hole in my family," end quote. He spoke about how family gatherings would never be the same without his niece. Sharon Guindon addressed the court next. She spoke about how she was at home in New Hampshire when she got a call from a Virginia number that she didn't recognize. Thinking it was Ashley calling her from her very first night on patrol, she answered. However, it was a man's voice on the other end of the line, and immediately she knew something was wrong. It was an officer from Ashley's department. He told Sharon that Ashley had been shot during a domestic violence call and told her which hospital Ashley would be at. Sharon called the hospital right away and was told that Ashley was shot in the shoulder and that she would survive. Not long after that, she got a call from the hospital. It was the trauma surgeon who worked on Ashley. The doctor told Sharon that she had done everything she could to save Ashley, but that she died because of the injury to her shoulder. Sharon wondered herself, where do I go from here? She said through tears, quote, "I lost my only daughter, my only child. It's just such a big void not having her here in my life anymore," end quote. Then she addressed the accused, quote, "Ronald Hamilton, you not only killed my daughter that fateful night, you killed me too. Ashley was my whole world," end quote. Cherry Murphy spoke about her daughter, Crystal. On February 27, 2006, Cherry was home in South Carolina. She got a call from one of Hamilton's sisters who told her that her daughter and her husband got into an argument and that Cherry needed to go to Virginia. Cherry asked, well, if it was just an argument, why do I need to drive to Virginia? Cherry made a few more phone calls and began to become very concerned. She was worried enough that she picked up her other daughter, Wendy, and the two drove to Virginia that very night. When they arrived at the Hamiltons' house in the early morning hours of February 28th, an FBI agent was there. Cherry cannot remember anything other than the agent telling her that they were sorry because she passed out right afterwards. Wendy remembers on the drive there that something just didn't feel right. She remembered that the FBI agent told her and her mother that Crystal had been shot and that her knees started to buckle. But just then, her mom fainted and fell, and Wendy was able to catch herself. Wendy spoke about the reaction that Cherry had when she regained consciousness. She told the court, quote, "I've never heard a cry like the cry she let off. It was a wailing. I knew that she was broken and I couldn't fix that," end quote. Cherry addressed the court saying, quote, "I'm broken. My life will never be the same. When she died, I died along with her," end quote. She went on saying that she was such a sweet person. If she was in here right now, you'd see that big, huge smile. At sentencing, the defense had its own witnesses to plead for Hamilton's life. They brought in his father to address the court. The older Ronald Hamilton was a retired police officer who had fathered Hamilton with a girlfriend on the side while he was married and had a wife and two daughters. Ronald Hamilton spoke for about an hour about how he didn't always treat his son the best. He told the court about an article that was published in a Charleston newspaper, and it was an article that profiled his career. In it, he talked about his wife and his daughters, but never once mentioned his only son, saying, quote, "I left my son behind," end quote. He also said, quote, "What my son did was wrong. Sometime we have to reach back and forgive," end quote. Hamilton's sister, Cassandra, the Summerville, South Carolina police officer, she also testified, and she testified to advocate for her brother's life. She told the court about how Hamilton had called her immediately after the shootings and how she urged him to give himself up. She also talked him out of killing himself and even committing suicide by cop. Now, I just want to give props to Cassandra because I think that she really is kind of like the unstated hero in this case. But for her guidance in this situation, it could have been even worse than it already was. So if Cassandra ever happens to listen to this, I just want to say thank you for being a hero. After everyone spoke at sentencing, the jury took 3 days to deliberate whether Hamilton should live or die for his crimes. They came back on October 25th, 2018, hopelessly deadlocked. The vote was split evenly, 6-6. Deadlocked, it meant that there would be no death penalty for Ronald Hamilton for killing his wife and for killing an officer. The jury did suggest a sentence. For 16 of the counts, they recommended that he receive 2 life sentences without parole, plus 5 life sentences, and 1 term of 93 years. Virginia law states that a judge cannot give a stricter penalty than a jury suggests. When they announced that his life would be spared, both Ashley and Crystal's mothers were devastated by the news. Cherry Murphy sobbed after court and said, quote, "I'm very hurt. I feel like I was cut by a knife. My heart is bleeding today. I'm so broken right now. I'll never be the same again," end quote. Sharon Guindon was heartbroken. She said, quote, "The jury got it wrong. It's horrendous. It goes very deep. I just want justice for her," end quote. The team of prosecutors were unhappy that the judge did not issue an Allen charge. If he had, then the jurors would have been made to work longer to continue to a unanimous decision. As it was, the judge imposed a life sentence. It wouldn't be until the next year, in March 2019, when Hamilton would officially be sentenced. He was given the opportunity to address the court, but chose to provide a 5-paragraph written statement rather than speak on his own behalf. In it, he wrote, quote, "I failed to keep my vow as a husband and father and my oath to the country. I changed the lives of so many people, and I pray for each and every one of them every single day," end quote. Hamilton apologized to his country, his family, Sharon Guindon, officers McEwen and Hempin, his wife's family, and his son Sean. Quote, "I was expected to conduct myself so as to bring credit upon the unit, the military service, and my country, regardless of the situation in which I find myself in, but I failed to live up to that creed," end quote. To his family, he said, quote, "I took the life of your sister, daughter, best friend. You all have every right to be angry at me. I changed our family in ways that cannot be undone, but I hope with time I can gain your forgiveness," end quote. Next, his letter addressed Sharon Guindon and Crystal's family, quote, "I am sorry. I will never live down what I did, and if I could go back in time and change things, I would. Nothing that I say will bring back your daughters, but I am truly remorseful that I took their lives and caused you this pain," end quote. For officers McEwen and Hempin, the letter provided an apology stating, quote, "I can't take back the physical and emotional scars I have caused you," end quote. At the end of the letter, he addressed his son, Sean. Quote, "Lastly, I want my son to know how sorry I am for taking his mother away from him and putting him in this terrible situation. I did not mean for this to happen, but it did, and there is no excuse or justification for my actions. I wish I could provide you a better explanation. This is all my fault," end quote. After giving his statement, Hamilton learned his fate. He received 7 life sentences, all to be served consecutively. This means he will never breathe free air again. He is serving his sentences at Sussex State Prison in Waverly, Virginia. I was unable to find the type of discharge that the Army gave him, but hopefully it wasn't a general discharge. So now I would like to take some time to talk about the 2 victims. Let's start with the officer. Ashley Marie Guindon was born on April 13, 1987 in Springfield, Hampden County, Massachusetts. She was born to parents Sharon and David Guindon, and she was their only child. She graduated from Merrimack High School in New Hampshire in 2005. And just a side note about Ashley's dad, David. He tragically took his own life in 2004, the day after he returned from a 6-month deployment to Iraq. David served on active duty with the U.S. Navy out of high school before switching to the Marine Corps Reserve, then the Air Force Reserve, and finally the New Hampshire Army National Guard. As a result of her father's suicide, Ashley was driven to help bring awareness to veteran suicide. She volunteered extensively with a suicide prevention program, but that wasn't all. She also volunteered at a soup kitchen at Thanksgiving and was active in the community whenever someone needed a helping hand. Ashley followed in her father's footsteps by joining the Marine Corps Reserve in 2007 and served for 7 years. During her time in the Marines, Ashley completed a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Science from Emory-Riddle, with minors in psychology, homeland security, and aviation security. As a Marine corporal, Ashley's job was as a field radio operator. She also worked as a personnel retrieval and processing specialist with the 4th Marine Logistics Group. In her role with personnel retrieval and processing, she was responsible for processing fallen service members and their personal effects. Ashley began an internship with special victims with the Prince William County Police Department in May 2011 and she later graduated with honors in 2015 from the police academy. She took a brief leave of absence before being sworn in on February 26, 2016. That was the day before she was shot responding to the Hamiltons' domestic violence call. She was the first Prince William police officer to die in the line of duty since 1990. A memorial was held for Ashley on Tuesday, March 1st. It was attended by thousands of people. One estimate placed the number at around 3,500 mourners. There was, of course, her family, but many were from the Prince William County community who wanted to thank the young officer for her sacrifice. Law enforcement officers came from hundreds of miles away to attend and participate. Mounted officers were lined up along the route. Officers wearing their dress uniforms stood outside surrounding the chapel. 2 fire trucks were parked with their ladders extended and a huge American flag hanging between them that framed the entrance to the parking lot. Several canines and their handlers stood near the entrance of the chapel. Prince William County Police Chief Stephen Hudson provided a powerful eulogy stating in part, quote, "She had accomplished more in 28 years than I think I could in 100. That was her desire, to serve, to be involved in the things that mattered, to give her life to something worth giving it to. And that's exactly what she did," end quote. After the memorial, as Ashley's casket was loaded into a hearse, the last call went out over a loudspeaker. Quote, "All units stand by for a special announcement. Emergency traffic only. 11:45. Prince William calling 11:45. This is the final call for 11:45. Officer Ashley Guindon, end of watch. February 27th, 2016. May you rest in peace. Prince William clear, 13:58 hours," end quote. The hearse pulled away, led by dozens of motorcycle police officers. The route was lined with color guards and 24 bagpipers playing Amazing Grace. Ashley's remains were brought back to Springfield, where a funeral service was held at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. After the service, the hearse was once again escorted by police motorcycles. A Marine Corps honor guard provided military honors, and Ashley was buried next to her father. Another memorial was held for Ashley at Embry-Riddle University in Florida, where more than 100 members of the school community came together to honor her. At the memorial, they announced that a scholarship had been established in Ashley's name for students who wish to pursue a degree in Homeland Security or Global Conflict Studies and have an intent to go into a career in public service. Chris Bonner, an associate professor of Homeland Security, eulogized Ashley, saying, quote, "Ashley was a remarkable young lady. As a police officer and U.S. Marine, she embodied the positive attributes of duty, honor, country, and service above self. She was driven to excellence," end quote. Crystal Cherie Howard Hamilton was born on April 17, 1986, in Charleston, South Carolina, to parents Cherry Murphy and Jimmy Richardson, and had one sister named Wendy. She was a proud mom to her son, Sean, who she called her, quote, "little munchkin." Crystal was known as being amazing and beautiful by her friends and family. In her role as a recovery care coordinator for the U.S. Marine Corps Wounded Warrior Regiment, Crystal dedicated her life to serving others and touched the lives of countless Marines, leaving a lasting impact on them. A resolution honoring Crystal was introduced by the Virginia State Legislature on March 7, 2016, 9 days after she was murdered. It read in part, quote, "Whereas Crystal Hamilton never met a stranger and was a devoted friend to many people, her passion for service was evident to everyone who knew her. And whereas Crystal Hamilton will be fondly remembered and greatly missed by her mother, Cherry, sister Wendy, beloved son Sean, and numerous other family members and friends," end quote. Some of her friends eulogized her in an Inside Nova article calling Crystal, quote, "amazing and beautiful." They wanted the whole community to know that Crystal loved her family, her friends, and working with wounded Marines. One of the friends noted that, quote, "she still is working with Marines. She's seeing them now in heaven. They're up there hanging out with her," end quote. For a memorial set up in front of Crystal's house, her friends tacked up a piece of pink poster board with 4 pictures of Crystal attached to it. On it, they wrote, quote, "Crystal Hamilton, God's new angel, we love you," end quote. They brought candles, a dozen white roses, and bunches of brightly colored mums. Over 200 people gathered in front of the Hamiltons' house to share memories of Crystal. Her friends remembered her as someone who really did light up the room when she entered. One stated, quote, "She was just an amazing person. She was beautiful inside and out. They wanted her to be remembered as a, quote, military wife who loved her family, her friends, and working with wounded Marines. At a second memorial held at the chapel on Quantico, the mother of a wounded Marine gave a short eulogy sharing how Crystal took care of her as a mother. She said, quote, Crystal was my go-to person. She became my friend. She was always asking how my son was doing, and then she would look at me intently and say, and how are you doing? The Wounded Warrior Regiment chaplain stated that Crystal was, quote, just a delightful person, a bundle of fun and full of energy, end quote. He added that she was the right person for the right job and was just super at everything she did. Crystal's remains were returned to South Carolina, where she was laid to rest in a cream-colored casket at a cemetery near her hometown. People brought teddy bears and cards to leave at her grave. Her sweet little munchkin Sean wore a suit and left a flower for his mom on top of her casket. Thank you so much, True Crime Army, for tuning in to another episode. This was a truly tragic episode, another case of domestic violence, and it's something that we really need to start paying attention to in the military because a lot of people do suffer from PTSD and there's situations that could happen like this. All right, everyone, I want to give a shout out to Myrtle for researching and writing this episode for me. My sources for today's case included articles by Prince William Times, Find a Grave, Washington Post, Virginia State Senate, Inside Nova, 13 News Now, the AP News, Courthouse News Service, NBC4 Washington, and WTOP News. Military Murder was created by Mama Margot Productions. The music was created by Ty-Ops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next week.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.